Welcome back into the data room. I'm Dan Quirk, head of marketing at Scale Matters and the co-host of the show here in season 2. And as always here in the data room, I'm joined by five-time CEO, three-time founder Scott Stauffer. He's currently founder and CEO of Scale Matters, and he's going to answer one big question today that will help B2B CROs, CEOs, and revenue leaders improve your go-to-market engines. So it goes without saying that to improve your go-to-market performance, you've got to have reporting that is accurate with high quality data and also accessible so it's easy to find answers. But beyond accuracy and accessibility, you also need your reporting to be actionable, and that's our topic of today. So I want to bring in Scott here because as a board member, Scott, you've seen a million slide decks with reports on them and charts on them. You've produced countless reporting decks for board and management meetings. So why don't you start, would you, by walking us through some of the common mistakes that are made when it comes to go-to-market reporting and share how adopting an actionable go-to-market reporting approach can improve go-to-market operations and performance.
Sure. Well, I'd say the most common mistake that's we see with reporting is there's too much data without any context, and whether that's produced in dashboards or scorecards or whatever it is, um, people become numb to it because it's very difficult to know how to interpret what's important and what's not and what's actionable. So, if you think about it, the overarching goal of data is to inform. And if you think about two different audiences, investors, they need a set of data that allows them to draw conclusions about the future prospects for a business, kind of based on current and historical performance. Operating leaders, heads of sales, heads of marketing, CEOs, CROs, CFOs, they need data, a set of data that informs them so that they know what initiatives they should execute on that will actually increase the company's performance in the future. In both cases, context is required to make that data actionable. Far too often, as I said before, companies get in this rut of looking at the same KPIs delivered through noisy dashboards and scorecards with little context. And as a result, they just really do become numb to the data and nothing jumps out as actionable. So let's explore how context makes data actionable. First, let's go back to the investor use case, and we'll do a very simple use case, and then we'll do a little bit of a deeper dive when we start talking about the context for data for operating leaders. So, what are the actions an investor can take? Well, if they're not currently an investor of a company, they can choose to invest or not invest in a business. If they are current investors in the business, their action options include investing more if things are going well, potentially trying to encourage a sale of the company if things are going okay but not great, or potentially replacing the CEO and or elements of the management team if things really aren't going well. So let's say that a given business just recognized $1 million in revenue last month. This is what I call a context free data point. I mean, it helps to have the investor understand what the overall size of this company is, the general scale of the business, but it doesn't help to inform them on whether the company's doing well or not. So if you think about what do most tech investors focus on, it's growth. And time is the element of context that enriches the data to provide that insight. So now, instead of just saying the business just recognized $1 million in revenue last month, we might say the business just recognized $1 million in revenue last month, which is up 30% year over year and up 10% quarter over quarter. So that context of time, basically comparing a data point over multiple periods of time, provides dramatically more information on how to judge this business. We now know that the size of the company, is effectively $1 million, and we also know its growth rate. But we also know that its growth is accelerating because 10% growth since last quarter is faster than 30% growth since last year. The second critical element of context for investors is benchmarks. Um, so, uh, if you look at other businesses, it helps a company, an investor evaluate how is this business doing relative to other opportunities I have to invest in. So, yes, I know this business is $1 million in scale, growing 30% year over year. That's accelerating because it's 10% quarter over quarter. But how does that compare to other companies I'm looking at? That's what benchmarks is. So, simply adding the context elements of time and benchmarks suddenly takes a useless data point, which is $1 million of revenue last month, and it now begins to inform the investor with what action to take: invest, sell, replace management, right? So now let's switch to probably what's more important to those of us, listening, is the case for context around data for senior revenue leaders. So the primary objective of the senior revenue leaders is to generate the highest amount of revenue and profitability for any given level of investment. Actions they can take to accomplish this include investing more money in sourcing strategies that are very productive versus and maybe taking money away from strategies that are less productive. So, for example, maybe we're seeing that LinkedIn advertising tends to be very productive to generate revenue for us. We'll want to put more money towards that. And maybe we want to take money away from trade shows because that doesn't seem to be particularly effective right now. They could take actions to adjust their target ICP, ideal customer profile, and their messaging to that profile of prospect. They could take actions to streamline processes in order to remove friction points. Lead distribution models come to mind here. They can also take staff related actions. So the data use case for these revenue leaders is to help inform them on which actions they could take that would likely have the greatest impact. And then to measure that impact to see if their assumptions behind those actions actually held true. So, in essence, if you think about it, we all go through a series of iterations to optimize our go to market engine. And this iterative process is far more effective when it's built on a foundation of actionable data rather than guesswork. So, how do we make that data actionable? Well, within the go to market mindset, we believe there are five important elements of context that make data actionable. And we believe that any kind of worthwhile data analytics strategy or data analytics software should natively incorporate these elements of context so that the senior revenue leaders can actually put their mental energies into deciding what actions do they want to take rather than spending a whole bunch of time wrangling with and evaluating the data itself. So, similar to with the investors, the first critical context for data in go to market is time. In other words, how is a given data point changing over time? This is absolutely critical to know if you're getting worse or better and how quickly. Time context should be provided as period over period analyses on an annual, quarterly, monthly, and even in some certain specific cases, weekly and daily basis. But time context should also be provided as a continuous trend analysis. So, as an example, consider a metric for website conversion rate from organic sessions to free trial requests. A slow and steady decrease in that metric is likely caused by one of two things. Either you've increased website sessions from visitors that aren't really in your ICP, or two, the messaging on your website has sort of become stale and uncompetitive. If, on the other hand, you saw a rapid fall off in this website conversion rate metric, that would more likely be indicative of changes that you've made to your free trial request form that actually caused an increase in abandonment. So, the context, simply by taking a metric and adding the context of time with trending and period over period analysis, it starts to uh, draw you to certain conclusions on what could be happening, which makes it actionable to actually resolve it. Second critical contextual element for go to market data is plan or goals, if you will. So, a good plan is basically the model which codifies the expectations and the goals and the underlying assumptions behind them, right? And by evaluating performance data, actual performance data, in relationship to plan, not only do we know where we stand relative to our goals, but if the plan and the data infrastructure are granular enough, we know precisely where and why the variances exist, which helps us then to inform actions that we can take on targeted initiatives, if you will, to drive improvement. So the context of plan also allows us to do effectively predictive gap analysis much earlier in the buyer journey. And that allows us to do course correction while there's still time rather than waiting till we simply understand that, hey, there isn't enough pipeline to support this quarter's booking goals. So the third contextual element for go to market data is benchmarks. Benchmarks are what allow us to know what good looks like and what bad looks like. It's fairly straightforward to have internal benchmarks, and these tend to be most valuable to provide context around individuals' performance. So, for example, um, if you know the historical average time it takes your SDRs to become fully ramped, it provides you with a way to evaluate how well new SDRs are ramping. But external benchmarks are far more valuable, and unfortunately, they're a lot more difficult to attain. So let's stick with the SDR ramping example. If you understood the industry wide benchmarks for SDR ramping across companies that have like similar characteristics as your company, that helps you understand if your own ramping time is actually a strength that you guys can exploit or a weakness that needs to be overcome. The fourth contextual element of go to market data is what we call relative impact. So, if you've built your go to market data infrastructure in a way that it can be a strategic asset to your revenue leaders, you will, by definition, be measuring hundreds, if not 1,000 or more data points across your go to market motion. It just isn't efficient or even possible to look at and interpret all of these data points. So, it's critical to understand which data points are telling you the most important things at any given point in time. This is one of the reasons we really don't like uh, looking at the same set of dashboards or scorecards, on a regular basis because they don't make the data jump out to you as what is most important at any given time. So, for example, let's say that quarter over quarter, we've seen maybe a 20% drop in inbound demo requests, a 20% drop in the conversion rate of demo requests to opportunities, and a 20% drop in your average selling price. Now, to address these things, you would likely execute three distinctly different initiatives to fix each of those performance issues. But let's assume that, some of those initiatives require the same resource, so you can't do them all simultaneously. So the issue for the leadership team is to say, which one of these should we prioritize? Which one of those data points is more important to us? And this is where relative impact data context comes in. It is a methodology for attributing economic value to these data points. So, back to our example, let's say your overall bookings shrunk by $500,000 over the last quarter, and you knew that $300,000 of that could be attributed to the drop in your average selling price. 150K of it could be attributed to the drop in conversion rate, and only 50K would be attributed to the drop in inbound demo requests. That would help you obviously know that the thing you should focus on as a company is fixing the issue around price pressure. So relative impact is critically important to marshal the resources of the company around things that matter most. And the fifth and final contextual element for go-to-market data that we think is very important is what we call journey relationship. Um, in general data terms, data analysis terms, you might refer to this as cause and effect or upstream, downstream context. In any case, it is the context that allows us to understand among related data points which one is the outcome and which one is kind of the cause or the contributor to that outcome. In a very simple example, if the number of opportunities created in a month was down 10%, the number of inbound demo requests was also down 10%, and all other performance metrics in the overall lead to deal process remained unchanged, while your attention would often go to the decreased opportunity count and its impact on current pipeline. In reality, the attention should be focused on the inbound demo requests because that performance was the root cause behind the decreased opportunity count. So it's critical that your go-to-market data infrastructure and strategy support the understanding of relationship between various performance measurement data points along the buyer journey. Otherwise, you will likely waste a lot of energy going down rabbit holes that don't solve the underlying root cause issues. So it's been a long-winded answer, but to summarize, context is what makes data actionable. And in the go-to-market world, the 5 critical elements of context that make it actionable are time, plan, benchmarks, relative impact, and journey relationship. And without these elements of context, you simply have data that's masquerading as information.
Super interesting, Scott, and that's a wrap here on this episode of the Data Room. So if you're interested in improving your go-to-market efforts with revenue operations and intelligence, go to scalematters.com and request a RevOps strategy call. We'll discuss the various options you have for building a RevOps function and help you choose the right approach for your company. Until next time, thanks for joining us here in the Data Room.